From the outside, it looks like women's basketball finally has its superstar, a once-in-a-generation rookie who turned the entire league upside down the moment she stepped on the court. But beneath all the excitement and praise, there's a deeper story nobody expected. One that reveals how a single player can quietly reshape the financial future of an entire league, and even rewrite the career trajectory of a seasoned veteran who's been grinding for years. Most people think they already understand everything about Caitlin Clark. The hype, the stats, the endorsements, the spotlight. But the part they don't see is the part that's changing lives in ways fans never imagined. And at the center of this hidden transformation is one veteran who unintentionally exposed a truth that shocked everyone. Caitlin Clark arrived in the WNBA with more pressure than any rookie in recent history, yet somehow managed to exceed the impossible expectations placed on her shoulders. Every arena she steps into suddenly sells out. Every TV broadcast breaks a record. Every highlight clip explodes across social media within minutes. It feels like she's been in the league for years, not months, and the sheer weight of her impact is something the sports world hasn't seen in decades. But the wildest part? Despite being the most talked-about athlete in women's basketball, she isn't even close to being the highest-paid player on her own team. Not even second. Not even third. Her salary sits closer to entry-level territory than superstar status. Meanwhile, across the same locker room sits Sophie Cunningham, a battle-tested veteran who's been through the physicality, the politics, the highs, the lows, and the long seasons. She knows this league better than most people watching from home. And somehow, without anyone realizing it at first, her connection to Clark started quietly shifting her career in a direction that nobody, not even Cunningham herself, could have predicted. What began as simple support soon turned her into one of the most visible personalities in the league. One whose entire public image suddenly exploded far beyond the numbers on the stat sheet. Fans noticed her fiery loyalty. Brands noticed her voice. Media outlets noticed her personality. And while people argued online about who's the face of the league, Cunningham was busy turning the conversation into something far more valuable: leverage. Yet here's the part that truly shocked fans. As Cunningham grew more vocal, more present, and more aligned with Clark, she eventually let something slip. Something that revealed a blunt truth about the business side of basketball that the league never openly talks about. A truth that connected the dots between Clark's superstardom, Cunningham's sudden rise, and the new economic engine powering the modern WNBA. And once people heard it, everything clicked. The story wasn't just about loyalty anymore. It was about survival, strategy, economics, and the new reality that the WNBA is entering, whether it's prepared for it or not. This is the story of how one rookie changed the financial blueprint for an entire league. How one veteran recognized the shift before most fans even realized what was happening. And how their unexpected connection revealed the new rules of the game. Rules that every future player will have to learn if they want to stay relevant in the most competitive era the WNBA has ever seen. The part that catches most people off guard is how dramatically different the financial reality looks once you peel back the surface. The world sees Caitlin Clark as the league's brightest superstar, the name that fills every headline and drives every conversation. They assume she's cashing million-dollar checks from the WNBA, dominating endorsement charts, and setting new salary standards for women's sports. But the truth is far stranger. Despite being the most recognizable figure in the league, Clark is earning a rookie-scale salary that feels almost unreal when you compare it to the attention she brings. Around $76,000 a year. That's the number. Not a typo. Not an exaggeration. That's the official base pay for the player responsible for selling out arenas across the country. Right across the locker room sits Sophie Cunningham, a seasoned veteran with nearly a decade of league experience behind her. She's tough, outspoken, strategic, and respected by teammates and opponents alike. Her own WNBA salary sits at $100,000, a modest difference on paper, but a clear reflection of how the league rewards tenure and stability. Her pay fits the rules, the structure, the agreement negotiated long before Clark ever stepped into the league. And that's the point. Clark's unprecedented fame doesn't matter inside that salary chart. The league operates on a system designed long before a superstar with her level of cultural influence existed. Fans who casually follow basketball often don't realize just how rigid the WNBA's pay structure is. No rookie can come in and demand a record-breaking contract. No franchise can outbid another team for the biggest college star. There's no competitive bidding war. No escalating offers. No team can simply pay Clark what she deserves based on the revenue she generates. Everything is locked into a predetermined grid that caps her salary from day one. Whether she sells 10 tickets or 10,000, her paycheck stays the same. That system was built to protect parity within the league, but now it's showing the cracks that come with sudden growth. Growth driven almost entirely by one new superstar. So how does the league's most impactful player end up being paid less than dozens of veterans who don't even generate a fraction of her attention? That's the question people outside the sports world struggle to understand. But inside the league, every player knows the system. They know the limitations. They know the numbers. And they know that Clark's official salary barely scratches the surface of her real value. It's a structure that leaves an obvious gap between what she earns from the league and what she brings to it. The numbers paint a strange picture. On one side, you have a rookie carrying the weight of national media coverage, bringing millions of eyes to every broadcast, and driving a level of demand the league has never seen. On the other, you have veterans, players who have fought through the tough years, the low viewership, the long travel nights, and the early morning practices, who now find themselves earning more from the league than the star who revived it. But while the salary system itself might seem unfair at first glance, it sets the stage for something far more interesting. Because Clark's true income, her real financial world, doesn't come from the WNBA at all. Her biggest paydays don't show up on a league contract. They don't come from game checks, performance bonuses, or team incentives. They come from an entirely different source that exists outside the league's control. And it's this difference, this massive divide between official league pay and off-court money, that quietly connects Clark's meteoric rise to the unexpected financial boost Sophie Cunningham is receiving on the other side of the locker room. Once you understand how little Caitlin Clark earns from the WNBA, the next part of her story becomes almost unbelievable. Because while her league paycheck barely reaches the five-figure range, her off-court income looks like something pulled straight out of a superstar's contract in a major professional league. That's where the real power of her fame shows itself. Not on the balance sheets of the Indiana Fever, but in the boardrooms of billion-dollar corporations scrambling to attach their names to her brand. Her partnership with Nike alone is the kind of deal that rewrites expectations for what a women's athlete can command. 8 years. $28 million. Averaging out to $3.5 million per year, the contract instantly placed her among the highest-earning female athletes on the planet before she had even played her first professional game. Companies typically wait to see how a rookie performs before offering anything significant, but Clark's impact was so overwhelming that Nike locked her in long before anyone had the chance to outbid them. And that deal is only the start. Gatorade saw the shift coming and moved quickly, securing Clark as one of the faces of their modern athlete lineup. State Farm stepped in as well, recognizing that her broad appeal stretches far beyond sports fans. Wilson partnered with her to develop signature products that fly off the shelves the moment they're released. Each company wasn't simply looking for an endorsement. They wanted a long-term relationship with the athlete who was redefining viewership, engagement, and marketability in real time. For them, Clark isn't just a player, she's a cultural force. These partnerships place her income in a completely different universe from traditional WNBA salaries. While players around her work season to season hoping for incremental raises or modest contract bumps, Clark is earning more in a single endorsement cycle than the majority of the league earns over their entire careers. Her social media presence only amplifies that power. Every post becomes a marketing asset. Every interview becomes a platform. Every highlight clip becomes a mini commercial without feeling like one. Brands aren't paying for basketball, they're paying for influence, reach, authenticity, and connection. Clark just happens to have all four. And that influence isn't limited to her fans. Corporations track numbers obsessively, and Clark's numbers don't just stand out. They obliterate every benchmark they use to measure marketing impact. She sells merchandise faster than the supply chain can restock it. She drives viewership spikes that analysts once claimed were impossible for the league. She brings in casual fans, college fans, basketball purists, families, teenagers, and entire new audiences who never cared about the WNBA before she arrived. Her presence doesn't just boost ratings, it shifts demographics. The WNBA can't control what Nike pays her. They can't regulate what Gatorade offers. They don't have a voice in how much State Farm wants to invest. These revenue sources are outside the league's financial ecosystem, which means Clark is operating on a business level entirely her own. While her teammates collect standard league checks, Clark's bank account grows with every endorsement meeting, every commercial shoot, every brand campaign, and every marketing strategy that uses her face as its centerpiece. It's a financial world that feels almost disconnected from the league she plays in, like two realities running in parallel. But this massive corporate machine surrounding her doesn't just shape her own wealth. It shifts the economic gravity of the entire league. It alters public perception. It forces companies to acknowledge a new market. And it creates opportunities for players who never had access to these kinds of platforms before. And this is where the story gets even more interesting, because as Clark's commercial empire grew, it didn't just lift her up. It pulled everyone around her into a new level of visibility, opportunity, and financial possibility. And one veteran in particular ended up benefiting from this sudden economic surge in a way nobody could have predicted. The moment Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, something happened that league executives, analysts, and even longtime fans had never seen before. It wasn't just extra attention or a temporary spike in interest. It was a full-scale economic shockwave, so powerful that it immediately changed the financial landscape of an entire league. People talk about stars elevating teams, but Clark elevated an entire sport. This wasn't hype. It was measurable, undeniable, and so dramatic that even seasoned sports economists had to rethink what they believed about women's basketball. Everywhere she went, arenas transformed overnight. Venues that once struggled to fill lower bowl seats were suddenly opening upper-level sections just to keep up with demand. Season ticket packages sold out so quickly that teams had to invent waitlists. Road games turned into events, not just matchups, because every fan wanted to witness the rookie phenom in person at least once. It didn't matter if she was playing in a massive arena or a smaller venue. When Clark arrived, the place was packed. Television networks saw the change even faster than the teams did. Broadcasts featuring Clark didn't just outperform expectations. They shattered records that had stood untouched for decades. Networks that once slotted WNBA games into quiet afternoon hours suddenly pushed them into prime slots because the viewership numbers justified it. Some games saw ratings climb 200%. Others soared even higher. It became clear from data alone. When Clark played, people watched. When Clark wasn't in the lineup, networks felt the difference instantly. Merchandise was another story entirely. Jerseys sold out within hours of each restock. T-shirts, hoodies, posters, and collectible items disappeared from online stores faster than they could be printed. It got to the point where some brands openly admitted that they underestimated demand by an embarrassing margin. Clark's gear became the unofficial uniform of a new generation of fans, many of whom were engaging with women's basketball for the first time. But the financial impact didn't stop at attendance, ratings, or merch. It began influencing long-term structural revenue, the kind of revenue that shapes the future of a league. Corporate sponsors who once hesitated to invest heavily in the WNBA suddenly saw an opportunity too big to ignore. They didn't just want to join the movement. They wanted to be early, loud, and visible. The league's sponsorship portfolio surged in both value and volume. Companies that had never once touched women's sports were now bidding aggressively for partnership slots. The biggest ripple came from media rights. Networks realized that Clark wasn't simply a marketing moment. She was a sustainable asset. She drew consistent viewers, not just curious ones. She retained audiences week after week. That kind of reliability is the golden ticket in sports broadcasting. As the league approached new media negotiations, analysts predicted values that were once unimaginable. The numbers didn't move slightly, they exploded upward. Better media deals meant more league revenue. More league revenue meant higher salary caps. And higher salary caps meant every single player, veteran or rookie, would eventually see larger paychecks. And this league-wide growth didn't just help the teams, it directly benefited players who had nothing to do with Clark's personal endorsement empire. Veterans who had spent years grinding without widespread recognition suddenly found themselves in a rising tide environment. Ticket sales didn't just go up for the fever, they went up everywhere. Social media metrics for players across the league saw dramatic spikes. More eyes meant more opportunities for sponsorships, local endorsements, podcast deals, and personal brand growth. Sophie Cunningham found herself right in the center of this explosion. Even fans who barely knew who she was a year prior suddenly had her name in their search bars. Her social media presence grew at a pace that mirrored the league's larger surge. Brands began approaching players outside the typical superstar list, recognizing that the WNBA was no longer a niche market. It was a growing entertainment product with momentum. And as Clark transformed into the engine powering that growth, Cunningham emerged as one of the players positioned to benefit most from the shift. The Caitlin Clark effect wasn't a theory. It wasn't an exaggerated media term. It was a rapid, transformative economic boom, reshaping everything from franchise profitability to player branding. For the first time in league history, the WNBA wasn't just trending. It was expanding, maturing, and evolving at a speed that insiders had only dreamed of. And deep inside this new wave of visibility, Cunningham began carving out her own role. One no analyst saw coming, but one that would turn out to be just as financially strategic as it was fiercely loyal. As the league adjusted to the sudden storm of attention surrounding Caitlin Clark, one player stepped into a role that nobody expected, yet everyone quickly noticed. Sophie Cunningham, a hardened veteran who built her career on grit, toughness, and relentless competitiveness, became one of Clark's loudest and most consistent defenders. Not just during games, not just in passing comments, but across every platform where the conversation was starting to spiral out of control. It began subtly at first. A few supportive remarks during press conferences. A reassuring hand on Clark's shoulder during heated moments on the court. A firm word exchanged with opponents who pushed the rookie a little too hard. But as the season progressed and the pressure on Clark intensified, especially with the targeting, the physical play, and the scrutiny from other players, Cunningham's voice grew louder. She wasn't just defending a teammate. She was defending the league's new anchor, the player everyone was watching, talking about, debating, and analyzing to exhaustion. While others around the league criticized Clark's spotlight or made veiled comments about her becoming overhyped, Cunningham didn't hold back. When asked whether Clark deserved to be called the face of the league, Cunningham snapped back with a level of honesty that instantly spread across social media. On her podcast, she didn't sugarcoat a thing. She called out the critics. She labeled the doubters. She said plainly what many fans were thinking, but most players were too cautious to say publicly. And the bluntness of her message turned into a viral moment that reached every corner of the basketball world. Fans loved it. Media outlets replayed it. Social platforms ran wild with clips of her fiery statements. It wasn't just the words, it was the conviction. She spoke with the kind of intensity that made it clear she wasn't doing it for clout or attention. She genuinely believed every word. She had Clark's back in the way veterans sometimes support young stars, but rarely with this level of confidence and consistency. Every time Clark took a hard hit, every time a debate erupted online, every time a controversy sparked a new round of arguments, Cunningham was one of the first voices to jump in. On the court, she backed it up with the same energy. If teams tried to bully the rookie, Cunningham stepped in, physically, verbally, strategically. She made it known that Clark wasn't just some college star thrown into the spotlight. She was a teammate, a friend, and someone worth protecting. And fans took notice. They tweeted about it. They made edits of Cunningham stepping in after Clark was bumped or shoved. They started referring to her as Clark's guardian, her enforcer, her veteran shield. And as Cunningham leaned into this role, her own presence began to grow. No longer was she just a solid, reliable veteran who spaced the floor and played with toughness. She became a central character in the league's most-watched storyline. Her personality, brash, bold, unfiltered, suddenly fit perfectly with the chaotic energy swirling around Clark's arrival. Reporters started seeking her out for quotes. YouTube channels clipped her interviews. Fans commented on her attitude, her leadership, her fire. But here's where the story takes a different turn. Because while everyone saw Cunningham defending Clark on the court and in the media, hardly anyone realized that her loyalty was creating something far more valuable. Something that would reshape her own career as dramatically as Clark reshaped the league. What looked like pure support from the outside was quietly turning into one of the most unexpected and profitable branding shifts in modern women's basketball. And as Cunningham's voice grew louder, her relevance grew right along with it. creating opportunities she had never experienced at any earlier point in her 7-year career. On the surface, Sophie Cunningham's support for Caitlin Clark looked like nothing more than a veteran protecting her teammate, something fans have seen for decades in every sport. But behind the scenes, something far more calculated was happening. Without announcing it, without scripting it, and without making it obvious to the casual viewer, Cunningham positioned herself in a way that completely redefined her public identity, her commercial value, and her long-term career trajectory. What started as loyalty soon evolved into one of the smartest branding pivots the WNBA has ever seen. Before Clark arrived, Cunningham was known mostly for her toughness, her defensive presence, and her occasional three-point bursts. Hardcore fans respected her grit, but she wasn't a household name. Her social media following grew slowly. Her endorsements were minimal. Her momentum was steady, not explosive. She had the reputation of someone who worked hard, played hard, and earned her minutes the difficult way. She was respected, but not spotlight-driven. Everything changed the moment she stepped into the role of Clark's vocal defender. The timing was perfect. The league was in the middle of the biggest attention surge in its history, and Clark was the epicenter of it all. Anything connected to Clark automatically became part of the conversation. Clips, interviews, comments, reactions, even background moments caught on broadcast cameras. And Cunningham put herself right into the frame every single time the narrative heated up. Her social media metrics exploded almost overnight. Followers surged by the tens of thousands. Engagement doubled, then tripled. People who had never spoken her name before were suddenly searching for her, talking about her, quoting her, and reposting her clips. She became a fixture in trending discussions, not because she tried to ride Clark's popularity, but because she aligned herself with Clark at the exact moment the league's spotlight burned brightest. Brands noticed immediately. Sponsorship offers began rolling in from companies that suddenly saw Cunningham as more than a role player. They saw her as a personality, a voice, a character in the unfolding story of the league's new era. She wasn't just another athlete anymore. She had become the outspoken veteran standing beside the WNBA's biggest asset. And corporations love athletes who bring attention, emotion, and identity. That mix sells. That mix builds trust. That mix creates engagement. Within months, she secured at least 7 new endorsement deals, more than she had collected across her previous seasons combined. These weren't small partnerships either. They were lucrative, long-term, visibility-driving deals that instantly elevated her financial profile far beyond her WNBA salary. Cunningham became a marketing magnet because she symbolized something brands could package easily: loyalty, toughness, authenticity, and association with a rising superstar. Her podcast launch was another strategic masterstroke. By entering the media space while Clark was dominating the headlines, she created a direct pipeline to the audience most engaged with the league's drama, excitement, and growing popularity. And because she wasn't afraid to speak openly, her episodes generated headlines. They created viral clips. They fueled debates on social media. They turned her from a player into a content creator, a dual role that is becoming increasingly valuable in modern sports. Cunningham wasn't just benefiting from Clark's fame. She was positioning herself as an essential counterpart to it. The protector, the truth-teller, the veteran who wouldn't let critics or opponents diminish the league's new star. Fans gravitate toward these roles because they feel real, relatable, and emotionally charged. And in the business of sports, emotional resonance is currency. This new version of Cunningham wasn't accidental. It wasn't random. It was the result of understanding the moment, reading the environment, and stepping into the narrative before anyone else had the boldness to do it. She didn't need to change who she was. She simply amplified the most compelling parts of her personality at the exact moment the world was paying attention. And this shift didn't just give her fame, it gave her leverage. Leverage in negotiations. Leverage with sponsors. Leverage with teams watching her behavior off the court as much as her production on it. In the modern sports economy, players aren't just athletes, they're brands. And Cunningham transformed hers in a way that positioned her for the biggest opportunities of her entire career. But what truly turned heads was what happened next. Because after months of speculation from fans and analysts, Cunningham effectively confirmed what everyone had been whispering. Her loyalty wasn't just emotional, it was financial. As Cunningham's visibility continued to rise, analysts across sports media began piecing together the pattern. What fans first saw as simple loyalty started looking more like a deliberate, expertly timed career move, one that may have been instinctive, but also incredibly strategic. It wasn't opportunism in a negative sense. It was something far more impressive, a veteran recognizing a once-in-a-lifetime shift in her industry and moving faster than anyone else to align herself with it. Sports marketing experts pointed out that Cunningham was doing something rare, something players in every league aim for but few ever manage to achieve. She was turning herself into a narrative. Not a side story. Not a background presence. A full-on character in the WNBA's most compelling storyline. Think of how certain NBA enforcers gained cult followings by standing beside superstars, or how role players turned into beloved icons because they were part of an unforgettable era. Cunningham wasn't just riding the wave, she was cementing her place inside it. What made her move so effective was that it didn't feel forced. It felt natural, authentic. Fans never saw her as someone trying to manipulate the moment. They saw her as someone fiercely defending a teammate who was being pushed, shoved, and criticized more than any rookie in recent memory. That authenticity is what made sponsors comfortable investing in her. It's what made analysts take her seriously. And it's what made viewers start paying attention to everything she said. Her newfound identity as Clark's protector created a clear narrative archetype. She became the veteran who wasn't afraid to call things out. The one who stood her ground. The player who pushed back against unnecessary hate. And the league itself benefited from it, because every story needs conflict, tension, and characters who carry the emotional weight. Cunningham delivered all three, consistently. Analysts also pointed out how smart this move was from a business perspective. By positioning herself publicly beside the league's most valuable player, Cunningham expanded her income potential far beyond what her statistics alone could produce. She changed how teams viewed her, not just as a shooter or defender, but as a media-savvy leader capable of navigating the complex environment around a superstar. That kind of value is rare. Teams crave players who help maintain chemistry around big personalities. Cunningham showed she could do that on camera, under pressure, and in real time. This new perception gave her something even more important: negotiating power. As she approached free agency, her unique brand image became a powerful asset. Teams weren't just evaluating what she could offer on the court. They were evaluating her influence off it, her voice, her following, her impact on the locker room, her ability to connect with fans, her capacity to draw attention, and her proven track record of stepping into the spotlight without collapsing under it. Those qualities matter deeply in a league fighting to grow, expand, and increase its national relevance. Some analysts even suggested that Cunningham's move represented the future of athlete branding in women's sports. In a landscape where salaries remain relatively low, players who can position themselves as personalities, media figures, storytellers, protectors, entertainers, unlock revenue streams that traditional basketball metrics can't measure. Cunningham tapped into that model first. She became an example others could follow. A blueprint, in a sense, for how to turn authenticity into income without compromising personal identity. Her rise also revealed something else, something far more profound. The modern WNBA isn't just about who scores the most points or who has the highest PER. It's about cultural influence, visibility, connection. Players who understand this earn more, grow more, last longer. And in that environment, aligning with Clark wasn't just smart, it was visionary. What transformed this conversation from speculation into certainty was what happened next. Cunningham herself, without hesitation, openly acknowledged the logic behind everything analysts were suggesting. And her candid admission stunned fans, confirmed the theories, and gave everyone a raw look into the new business reality shaping the WNBA's future. The moment that changed the entire conversation didn't come from analysts, insiders, or leaked reports. It came straight from Sophie Cunningham's own mouth. After months of speculation, fan theories, and online debates, she finally addressed what everyone had been whispering. Her fierce defense of Caitlin Clark wasn't just emotional, it was practical, strategic, financially intelligent, and she admitted it with a level of honesty that caught everyone off guard. Cunningham didn't try to spin it. She didn't hide behind cliches. She didn't pretend it was all coincidence. She spoke plainly about what she saw happening in the league, and why she chose to stand where she did. She explained that Clark wasn't just another talented rookie, she was the league's most influential asset. The player who moved numbers. The player who drove ticket sales. The player who shifted broadcast ratings. The player whose presence alone elevated everyone's earning potential. Cunningham understood what some veterans initially resisted, that embracing Clark wasn't just good sportsmanship, it was good business. She knew that protecting Clark meant protecting the league's momentum. Protecting the momentum meant protecting revenue. Protecting revenue meant protecting future salaries, endorsement opportunities, and long-term financial stability for every player, including herself. This wasn't exploitation. It wasn't manipulation. It was recognition. Recognition of how modern sports economics work, and how one superstar can determine the trajectory of an entire industry. The part that truly stunned fans was how openly she discussed the ripple effect Clark created. Cunningham talked about the increased sponsorships, the attention, the media coverage, and the surge of interest that Clark brought into the WNBA. She acknowledged that players who had been overlooked for years were suddenly gaining attention, receiving brand inquiries, and experiencing career boosts they had never imagined. And she didn't shy away from the fact that her own opportunities were part of that wave. She made it clear that aligning with Clark wasn't just about loyalty, it was about understanding value. Clark's presence meant that every player's platform grew larger. Every team's visibility increased. Every endorsement possibility expanded. The entire ecosystem shifted in a way that improved the financial reality for everyone willing to step into the momentum rather than push against it. Her honesty resonated with fans because it cut through the polite, carefully scripted answers athletes often give when asked about business. She didn't dance around the implications, she embraced them. She acknowledged that the WNBA had entered a new era, one driven by visibility, personality, influence, and media power just as much as on-court performance. And it wasn't just Cunningham's transparency that turned heads. It was the confidence with which she spoke. She wasn't ashamed of the strategy. She wasn't embarrassed by the idea that branding matters. She didn't apologize for acknowledging that Clark's rise was a rising tide lifting every boat. Her tone wasn't defensive, it was matter-of-fact, almost proud. It reflected a new mindset among women athletes who refused to be judged for recognizing the financial side of their profession. Her statements reflected something bigger: the evolution of athlete self-awareness. No longer were players pretending that their careers were divorced from economics. No longer were endorsements considered side bonuses. No longer were athletes pressured to hide the fact that they were running personal brands. Cunningham spoke like a modern professional who understood the game beyond the hardwood: the business, the marketing, the perception, the value creation. And in doing so, she confirmed exactly what analysts had been saying for months. Her protection of Clark wasn't just about defending a teammate from cheap shots or criticism. It was about protecting an asset whose success directly influenced her own financial well-being. It was about understanding that loyalty isn't just emotional, it's strategic. And in a league where salaries are capped, branding is king, and attention is everything, that kind of strategy is not only smart, it's essential. Her candidness didn't just validate the theories. It exposed the new rulebook of the WNBA, one where players who understand the business side of the sport rise faster, earn more, and build careers that outlast their playing days. And now that the strategy had been confirmed, fans finally saw the bigger picture. A picture far more complex, far more modern, and far more transformative than anything the league had experienced before. When people talk about greatness in sports, they usually focus on talent, skills, records, championships, accolades. But the true measure of a superstar isn't just what they do on the court. It's what happens around them. The environment they create. The economic force they generate. The way they shift the culture, the business, the attention, and the future of an entire industry. And Caitlin Clark's arrival in the WNBA proved something that had never been this clear before. One player can fundamentally elevate an entire league. Clark didn't just boost viewership. She didn't just increase ticket sales. She triggered a full-scale restructuring of how the WNBA operates financially, culturally, and commercially. Her impact is so wide-reaching that it's difficult to compare it to anything the league has seen before. Suddenly, the WNBA wasn't just a sports league. It had become a fast-growing entertainment product, a mainstream conversation topic, a cultural moment extending far beyond traditional basketball audiences. For years, the WNBA functioned in a financial environment built on modest visibility and steady but slow growth. Teams operated on narrow margins. Salaries reflected limited revenue. Players often had to spend their off-seasons overseas just to make ends meet. There was passion, loyalty, and community, but the business side lagged behind. Clark's arrival rewired that entire structure in real time. She brought in viewers who had never watched a women's basketball game in their lives. She converted casual fans into dedicated followers. She made national headlines consistently. She forced networks and sponsors to pay attention to numbers they couldn't ignore anymore. And here's where things became even more transformative. The benefits weren't limited to Clark. They spread outward, touching every player in the league, regardless of team, position, or market size. Brands that once viewed women's sports as a risk suddenly saw enormous opportunity. Media companies with historically small WNBA budgets started negotiating larger deals. Teams began investing more in marketing, operations, and game day production because the return on investment was finally there. The league as a whole shifted into a higher financial tier. In this new environment, veterans like Sophie Cunningham became uniquely positioned to capitalize. She wasn't a rookie trying to establish a footprint. She wasn't a fringe player struggling to stay on a roster. She was a seasoned professional with the voice, experience, and personality needed to thrive in a spotlight-heavy era. Clark created the wave. Cunningham learned how to surf it. The emerging dynamic revealed a new reality within professional sports. Money doesn't just follow talent, it follows attention. When Clark commanded national focus, every player near her gained amplification. When she drove ratings, the league gained leverage. When she drew sponsors, teammates gained opportunities. When she brought controversy, defenders like Cunningham gained influence. It was a system of interconnected value, where one superstar's gravitational pull strengthened everyone in her orbit. This shift also changed how players approached their personal brands. For decades, female athletes were criticized for self-promoting or discussing money openly. They were expected to play for love of the game, not financial strategy. Clark and Cunningham shattered that old narrative. They showed that being strategic doesn't diminish authenticity, it enhances it. They proved that women's sports don't need to apologize for being profitable, competitive, or commercially powerful. Cunningham's role in this ecosystem illustrates a new blueprint for players in growing leagues. Build a clear identity. Connect yourself to rising cultural moments. Speak boldly when the world is listening. And treat your career like a business, not just a sport. The truth is simple. When a league grows, it doesn't grow evenly. Growth creates hotspots, players who become central figures, storylines that attract attention, and environments where personalities like Cunningham can transform into recognizable forces. Clark became the spark that ignited the WNBA's next era. Cunningham became the veteran who recognized the opportunity and seized it flawlessly. Together, without planning it, without formal agreements, and without orchestrating a partnership, they revealed the new economics of women's basketball. An ecosystem where collaboration, visibility, and branding matter just as much as statistics and box scores. The WNBA didn't just change because Clark entered it. It changed because players like Cunningham understood what her arrival meant. And for the first time in league history, the financial future of every player, every team, and every franchise became tied to the emergence of a single once-in-a-generation athlete. When Caitlin Clark stepped into the WNBA, most fans assumed her influence would be limited to highlight plays, buzzer beaters, and sold-out crowds. What they didn't expect, what almost no one could have predicted, was the economic transformation that would ripple outward from her presence. Clark didn't just become a star. She became a catalyst, a financial engine, the spark that pushed the league into an entirely new era, changing not only how people watch women's basketball, but how players navigate their careers within it. Her salary may be small, but her value is enormous. Corporations know it. Networks know it. Fans know it. And most importantly, The players around her know it too. That's why veterans like Sophie Cunningham understood early on what was really happening. She recognized that Clark wasn't simply the next big name. She was the axis the league was beginning to rotate around. And instead of resisting the shift, she stepped into the moment with purpose. Cunningham's fierce loyalty didn't just help Clark, it helped herself. It elevated her platform, expanded her brand, increased her earning potential, and repositioned her as a central figure in the narrative driving the WNBA's growth. She wasn't chasing attention. She was responding to opportunity. She recognized the financial reality. Supporting the league's biggest asset supports every player's financial future, including her own. And she embraced that truth openly, honestly, and without hesitation. This is what makes their story so compelling. It's not a scripted partnership. It's not a planned alliance. It's the intersection of timing, economics, and authenticity. Two careers rising together in a league undergoing its biggest transformation yet. Clark brought the surge. Cunningham recognized the wave. And the WNBA, for the first time in its history, found itself propelled into mainstream relevance at a speed that shocked even the most optimistic insiders. Their dynamic reveals the future of women's sports. A world where stars don't just inspire, they reshape markets. A world where players don't just compete, they build brands. A world where loyalty, visibility, strategy, and opportunity collide to create entirely new career paths. Clark represents the power of cultural momentum. Cunningham represents the power of strategic positioning. Together, without ever trying to, they demonstrated how one superstar can elevate a teammate, a franchise, and an entire league simply by existing in the right moment. This is the new WNBA economy. Faster, brighter, bolder, and more lucrative than anything that came before it. And the players who recognize that shift, who understand the mechanics behind the scenes, who embrace their roles in a changing landscape, those are the players who will thrive in this next chapter. The story isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about influence. It's about identity. It's about understanding the value of being part of something bigger than yourself. Caitlin Clark changed the game. Sophie Cunningham learned how to play the new one. And the league will never be the same again. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the evolving economics of the WNBA, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It helps the algorithm recognize that this is content worth pushing to more people. And it genuinely supports the time and research that goes into videos like this. While you're here, go ahead and like the video if you found the story informative or surprising. And don't forget to leave a comment below. Sharing your thoughts, whether you agree, disagree, or want to add your own perspective, helps boost engagement and tells YouTube that conversations are happening around this topic. Your interaction isn't just appreciated. It actively changes how far this video travels.